In this episode of Derp Star, I converted the black hole boss encounter to work with Godot 4. First, I'll make a new 2D scene for the boss encounter. And save that. Then I'll attach a new script, add an export multi-line for the splash text to make a text box, and a regular export for the gradient. Then in the editor, I'll set the default text and make a default gradient as well. Then I'll make a new inherited scene from the encounter and save it in the black hole folder. Set the splash text to black hole, and I'll make a unique copy of the gradient so it doesn't overwrite the original. Then I want to invert the colors, and I'll put dark blue in the middle. Like that. Now I need to fix the boss flash overlay. So I'll move the animation player to full opacity. Then in the shader material on the color rect, it's throwing an error that screen texture has been removed in favor of using hint screen texture with a uniform. So to continue with minimal code changes, add this line to the top of the shader. So I'll go ahead and type that. Hint screen texture filter linear bitmap with a semicolon. And then I'll set the gradient to a new gradient 1D, and you can see it turned the background to gradient. But if I change the colors, you can see that it's correctly applying the shader. Now I'll fix the flash text. Currently it's hidden behind the boss core counter at the top left. So I'll set the horizontal and vertical alignment to center, then make a new label settings and increase the font size. I want to use the hacked font, so I'll drag that into the font variable, and I'll set the base color to black and the outline color to white, and then increase the outline size till it looks good. Now I'll re-enable the boss spawner under dimension by enabling auto start on the timer, and I'll set the wait time to 1 second for testing. Then in the script, there's a conflict between the spawn boss signal and function, so I'll change the function name to spawn. Then I'll set the boss list to an array of packed scenes. And I've gotten rid of the flash config, so I'll just pass the boss to the play boss flash function. And I'll reconnect the spawn timer timeout signal to the spawn function. So now in the main scene, in the overlay script, I'll change the parameter in play boss flash to a boss encounter. And it doesn't recognize the class name because I forgot to set it to boss encounter in the script. Then I'll change the gradient to the splash gradient and the text to the splash text. And I'll need to change this to shader parameter for that to work. Then I noticed that the animation was not playing, and I was kind of confused because if I moved it up to the main node, then it worked just fine. But I finally realized this is because the overlay was set to process when paused, which is fine for the pause menu, but obviously I want the boss flash to play when it's not paused. So I'll set the process to always, and then these nodes aren't grayed out anymore. So I'll put the animation player back under the boss, and now the text flash works. Now you may have noticed that the node visibility doesn't affect the shader, and it's completely opaque for the whole animation, but that's fine because the shader script already has a mix amount parameter. So I'll just add a new track, set the mix amount to 1 in the middle, and at 0 on both ends. And now the gradient fades in and out as well. Now I'll open up the Derp space dimension and add the boss encounter for the black hole to the boss spawner list. And now it should play the boss flash screen. And it looks like that works now. So next I'll make it actually spawn the black hole. So I'll open up the black hole boss encounter and add a new node 2D for the visuals so I can scale all the child nodes at once. Then I'll copy the shader and center nodes from the original black hole scene and paste them in the visuals. Now I need to fix the shader, obviously. So I'll open up the shader materials script, and I can see it has the same problem as before, that screen texture has been removed. So I'll copy the screen texture parameter from the boss flash. So now you can see it's warping the background. I'll give it a new curve texture. And add a couple points. So this affects the center start. And this cuts off the circle at the radius at around 0.5. It meets the edges, so I'll leave the endpoint there, and I'll add a couple more points to give it the desired effect. And it is hard to see the effect on the gray background, so I'll go ahead and run it. And now you can see that it warps the objects as they get close to the black hole. Now I'll add an animation player to add the fade in and out effect. I can't just copy this from the original scene because it won't attach to the correct node. So I'll make this 5 seconds long and enable autoplay on load. Then I'll map the modulate at 1. Then change the alpha to 0. And then set the keyframes every other second. So it alternates. And now you can see the center fades in and out, but as we saw before, this won't work on the shader. So I'll open up the shader script. And copy the mix amount from the boss flash, which is a float from 0 to 1. Then I'll get my input color, and instead of setting the color, I'll set the sampled color to the RGB, and finally set the color to the input color mixed with the sampled color at mix amount. So now if I change it to 0.5, it gets semi-transparent. Then I'll select the animation player and make keyframes at the appropriate points every other second. So now you can see in the material preview that it's fading in and out with the circle. And I'll launch the game to make sure it's all working. As you can see, it fades in and out, and then makes the black hole texture. Then I'll add a area 2D with a collision shape as a child set to circle with a radius of 150. Then in the area under gravity, I'll set space override to combine, enable the point, and set that to 0, 0, and set the gravity to 250, so it's not so strong that the player can't escape. Then I'll make the area 2D mask with the second collision layer, so it can pick up the items as well. This does work for the bumpers, but it doesn't affect the player, because I don't have any collision layers selected, just the mask. This did work before and prevented the player from getting launched by your own gravity beam, but it doesn't seem to work anymore, so I'll enable the first collision layer. So now the player is affected by the black hole. As you can see, the player and the bumpers get sucked in. But if I change to the gravity beam and then use it, the player begins flying around uncontrollably. So I need to add a separate collision layer for the player and player allies, which I'll probably do next time. The gravity beam is a little bit ridiculous though, so I'll turn down the force on that a bit. I have it turned all the way up to like 4,000, so maybe like 1,400. Now, I don't actually want the black hole to affect the player until after the intro sequence is done, so I'll set the area collision shape to disabled by default, and I'll remove the default boss encounter script and attach a new one extending boss encounter. Then I'll copy from the original black hole, I'll copy the state enumerator and value. So we have the fade in, grow, collapse, and finish beam states, and it's set to fade in by default. Then I'll connect to the animation player animation finish signal. And copy the state equals grow and set the collision shape disabled to false, which will re-enable the collision shape when the fade in animation is done playing. And you might want to check for the name and other states if you have multiple animations in the player, but I only have one, so this will work for now. And I'll run it again to see if it works. No. It can't find the boss splash text because I attached a new script to the node. Even though it is extending the boss encounter, it resets the values. So I'll set the name and the colors. Like so. And now it should work. So it's not affecting the player right now until it becomes fully opaque, and then it pulls the player in. So that works. Now I want to increase the black hole size as it absorbs bumpers. So I'll set the size float equal to 1 at the beginning. Then in the original black hole script, I'll copy the set size and increase size functions. And I'll comment that out for now. So this gets the square root of the size and applies it to the scale so that the two-dimensional area will increase at a consistent rate. However, I don't want to increase the entire node like I was before, so I'll set the visuals scale and the area scale separately. And in the process function, I'll call increase size by the delta. Now, after the intro sequence, the black hole should grow in size, and the gravity area increases as well. Now, I want the black hole to stop growing once it reaches the maximum size. So I'll set the max size equal to 5. And then in set size, if the size is greater than or equal to the max, call the explode function and set size equal to max size. Then I'll copy the explode function from the previous black hole and add it to the script. Set the area 2D gravity to -200 so that it will push the player and the items away. And I'll set the state to collapse. Now the tweens have been depreciated as nodes, and you have to call them as a class instead. So as you can see there. So I'll comment out the tweens, and I haven't added the item timer or light beams yet. I'm using a tween in the first place because the maximum size variable can change, and that's not ideal for an animation player. So I'll make a new tween and call tween property on the object, variable name, new value, and time elapsed. And if you call from current, it'll use the current value as the starting point. Now I just want to scale the visuals and not the area so that it will continue to push the items out as it spawns them. So I'll set the scale on the visuals, the end value to vector 2.0 over the course of 5 seconds, and I'll run that. And now it shrinks once it gets to the maximum size. Now I'll copy the tween completed function from the original black hole and comment out these for now, and I'll change the name to collapse complete, then connect the finished signal from the tween to the collapse completed method on the encounter. And I'll just print collapse complete to make sure it makes it to the function. So it expands, then as it gets smaller it pushes the player away, and finally it does call the collapse complete function. So the boss core did not drop because I haven't added the appropriate signals to the encounter. So in spawn boss on the dimension, I have all of the signals that the boss can emit, so I'll copy those and paste them into the base encounter. So this will allow the boss to spawn the items and explosions and emit the boss defeated signal as well. And I'm not sure if I still need the spawn boss signal. I was using that for the space worm, but I changed the way that I'm handling that now, so but I'll leave it there for now. Now, back in the black hole encounter, I'll disable the area 2D collision shape on collapse complete, so it doesn't push the boss core away from you. Collision shape dot disabled equals true, and I'll turn down the timer and maximum size to 3 to make it faster for testing. So now the black hole drops a boss core when it's done collapsing, but it flies directly away from the player for some reason, so I'll have to fix that. So I'll open up the boss core item, and it looks like they just reversed the start and end endpoints. on the angle to point function. So I'll reverse those and try it again. So now the core flies towards the player, and I'll need to fix the particle trail as well, but I'll worry about that later. Now I want to play the light beam effect as the black hole collapses, so I'll copy the particle emitter from the 3.5 version and put it behind the shader, then set emitting to true, and the beam of light appears in the center. Then in the process material, I'll set the angle to between -720 and 20. Then in the particle flags, disable the z-axis, and now they appear all around the circle. Then I'll increase the initial velocity can have some variation, so between 400 and 600, and enable align Y so that they will travel in the direction that they're rotated in. So that's working now, and I'll disable the emitting. Then in the script, I'll re-enable the light beams dot emitting in the explode function, and I can get rid of the old references to the tween. And in the collapse complete, I'll set the emitting equal to false. So if I just call QFree from here, this will make the beams disappear immediately, so I'll show you. So now the black hole emits beams of light as it collapses, but they get deleted immediately at the end instead of finishing their trajectory. So previously I had a timer node set to 5 seconds to wait for the light beams to finish. Then on timeout, it would queue free and emit the boss defeated signal. But apparently you can use the tween interval as a timer, so I'll use that instead. So I'll copy the light timer timeout function to the black hole boss encounter and rename it light beams finished. Then call queue free and emit the boss defeated signal. I'll get rid of queue free there, and instead of the light timer, I'll make the new tween and set the interval to 5 seconds. Then I'll connect the finished signal to the light beams finished function. Now the light beams continue traveling once the black hole closes, and it emits the boss defeated signal, so a new black hole will spawn shortly after. Now I want it to drop items as it collapses, so I'll copy the item list and the generate item function. Previously, I was using a timer on 0.1 seconds to call the generate item function, and I started the timer in the explode function and stopped it on collapse complete. However, with the tween callback, you can call a method every X amount of time and set the loop to infinite. So I'll do that instead. So I'll copy the first example into the explode function. Change the name to item tween because I want to make a new one. Set the delay to 0.1 and the callback to generate item. Then I want to connect the tween.finished signal to the item tween kill function so that it stops the item spawning when the black hole collapse completes. So now the black hole drops health packs, energy packs, and ore chunks as it collapses, and they stop spawning once it's done. And finally, I need to make the black hole deal damage and get bigger when it absorbs the bumpers. So hopefully I can just copy the process function and this will work. So this is area 2D dot overlapping bodies. And I need to set the DPS and faction variables. Also set the radius equal to the area 2D collision shape instead. Now, it is difficult to demo the bumper absorption when the player can't use the gravity beam, so I'll just disable the player collision shape for now. But now I can drag the bumpers into the black hole to make it increase in size. So they get pulled in and it deals damage as they stay within the radius of the black hole. And eventually it does enough damage to destroy them. Then it grows in size. So now I just need to find some more bumpers to drag into the black hole. They seem to be stuck to the gravity beam still, even though it's disabled. So I'm not exactly sure why that's happening, but I'll figure it out when I redo the collision layers. and eventually it will absorb enough bumpers to explode. So right now it's kind of a gravity aura around the player, which is kind of interesting. So I can help it out a little bit. As long as the black hole does the final tick of damage. There it goes. So the explosion was triggered and all of the items were spawned. And then another black hole appears. And I can't pick up the boss core, so it's just stuck. But that's all. So it crashed when the black hole tried to check if the points variable was in the dropped item. And I'm pretty sure that's because you have to put the variable name in quotes now. And I'll drag a cobalt ore chunk into the black hole radius to make sure that worked. So now it absorbed the item and didn't throw an error. And that's all for this episode of Derp Star. Next time I'll refactor the gravity beam and player collision layers to make that work. But thank you for watching and have a great day.